guy who spoke English was like, it's closer to 30 degrees. And I was just like, oh, wow, okay. So he really knows his stuff. He's correcting me coming down the mountain. But, it was also, just that you say about Guamao, on the side of the mountain hiking, there were hundreds of people around hiking up and down all at the same time.
I think that's something else that kind of makes me hesitant to take those hikes and go to the path and that kind of stuff, that it doesn't feel very naturey when you're also back to back.
You have to go way out there. In Montogo, which is way to the west of Beijing, if you keep going, there's some temples and stuff out there that almost no one ever goes to, and you can escape the crowd, but you have to go far. You have to really go far. So you do go back, so you have family back there. How do they feel about their daughter living in China for 11 years?
My mom's been twice or 3 times, I think. So I think
she came here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
I think 3 times.
Wow.
So she's got a very deep understanding of how I live here, and what I do here, and that kind of thing. And I speak to my mum on chat.
Wow.
So we,
that's great.
Back and forth. And I have regular weekly or every other week video chats with my dad. I think it's helped my dad's technology a lot. His girlfriend bought him a iPad, and so we FaceTime, and I speak to him every other week. But I think I'm fortunate that I've got very supportive parents, and they can tell that I'm happy here. And so while I'm happy here, I think they're happy. I mean, of course, I'm sure they would like to see me more often. But
yeah, sure. What was your experience of being a tour guide for family when they came to Beijing? Where did you bring them? What did you show them? What did they want to see, and what did you have to show them?
So the first year my mum came here, planned a huge tour, and in hindsight, it was too much. But we went from Beijing to Xinjiang to Xi'an, Chengdu, and Shanghai.
Wow!
And we did a huge kind of.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we did a big tour, and so we wanted to do those kind of big cities. We wanted to hit the sort of what you see in kind of guidebooks, the terracotta warriors and the pandas, and Shanghai skyline.
What if it was her only time coming?
Exactly. Yeah, because at that point, I think she came.
Did you go to the wall?
Yes, yeah. I think she came my 2nd year. And so I think at that point, maybe she was thinking, and I was also thinking, this might be the only time she comes to China. Let's hit it hard, And so we did a lot. And so not only was it being a tour guide for my mom, but it was only my 2nd year in China as well. And that was, 2013. And so still no DD, no WeChat. And so
hail a taxi like this. It's interesting, in America, you don't hail a taxi like this.
Yeah.
You hail a taxi hand out. So it's actually just
the palm of the hand.
Okay, that's really interesting. I think after a few more years, she came back because she came 3 times.
Yeah.
So after you had become a seasoned Beijinger, what other kinds of things, maybe more specific to your experience of Beijing, did you show relatives?
I think the 2nd time that she came back, and especially when my husband's mom came here as well. Just a few years ago.
Were they together? Was this for your wedding?
No. But when she came back a 2nd time, and when my partner's mom came, we definitely did more of the kind of local things, places that we really enjoy, as opposed to kind of big tourist attractions.
Well, for our fans who live outside of China, what were some of those really cool places that you showed them?
Just kind of cool, little restaurants and coffee shops, and parts of the Hutongs that you might not necessarily see in a guidebook.
Yeah.
Kind of just interesting things that we...
You want to plug any one of these places?
I mean, if you're a huge kind of coffee fan, any of kind of the small sort of coffee shops that are near the Lama Temple, along that road, they're absolutely fabulous. Really, really great, kind of small, kind of little cafes.
Strange for me, when I go to the Lama Temple, I like to go to the Temple of Confucius, which is about 10 or 15 minute walk from there, and there's a room adjacent to it where the emperor used to study. It's it's a vaulted ceiling. It's really lovely.
Yeah.
So I think a lot less people go to
that particular. You don't really see it in sort of guidebooks, but it might be something that you only find if you kind of live here.
Oh, yeah.
You're listening to The Bridge.
Why dancing? What is it about dancing? So there's different kinds of learners, which actually is associated with your school, which teaches a variety of intelligences, and kinesthetic is one of those. So is it that you're just really a moving kind of person, or what is it about contemporary dance that draws you to that?
Also the jazz hands, right? I've
Step up one?
No idea. I've always liked dance and movement. Right since being small, I've always been enrolled in dance class or gymnastics, and I think whenever you find something that you enjoy and that you are reasonably good at, it makes you want to keep pursuing.
You're like, hey, I'm good at this.
Yeah, like maybe I should take more classes in this.
Well, what other hobbies do you have here in Beijing that maybe I don't know about, or that you would like to share with our listeners?
I'm a big gardener right now.
Right.
Yeah.
What is you mentioned this? What is urban gardening?
Urban gardening. So essentially, it's growing plants in a big city. You think of gardening being like in England, the English countryside and the beautiful rose garden and those kind of things, and you don't really associate growing plants or flowers or vegetables or fruits in a big city.
In a big city like that, how is it you have a garden?
So actually now, last year we managed to find a first floor apartment that had a garden.
Is this like a hotel?
No, it's
like a tower.
Yeah.
But you're just on the first floor.
On the ground floor with a garden. Yeah, there are several communities like that in Beijing. You just kind of have to.
Is it more expensive than ours?
Actually, outdoor spaces, they're not very, very popular with kind of, it's hot in the summer and it's cold, and so I think a lot of them, when we were on our ground floor apartment, 2 apartments either side of us, they barely used their outdoor space. We went the whole 9 yards. We did, painted the fence and outdoor patio furniture.
Yeah,
and
I've seen the pictures. It looks really nice.
Yeah.
So the growing, is it because you want to eat your own food? Is it for environmentalism? Is there a bit of both?
I mean, it's definitely more hobby than for kind of sustainability. No, I mean...
One cabbage at a time.
One tomato at a time. I mean, definitely for me, I think it's about the process of it. It's about putting something in the ground and watching it turn into a plant, or watching it fail, and then, what went wrong? Can I do it again better next time? I like that. I like the process of taking care of something, and I think that probably comes from my dad, right? He's a farmer, so he's kind of got that growing energy that kind of filtered into me.
I have a silly question from a totally ignorant perspective. Potatoes, they grow underground. Do some things grow in the winter?
Yeah, there's loads of different vegetables, things like kale, certain types of lettuces. You can keep potatoes in the ground over the winter. And now's a really good time to get your kind of bulbs out of the ground for spring next year. But even if people haven't got an outdoor space, urban gardening's more about propagating inside as well. Especially in Beijing, where a lot of people have got those kind of balcony areas.
Yeah.
They get tons of heat. Where people would normally dry their clothes in Beijing.
I get these tiny little gnats that you can barely see that buzz around when I have a house plant. Do you get more of those when you grow a lot of stuff inside?
I don't grow any food plants inside. I have house plants.
Yes.
But the best kind of advice to sort of house plants is, and this is going to sound really strange, but showering your house plants. So if you've got a house plant, take it out of the pot. You should have it in one of those like plastic kind of growing pots with holes at the bottom.
Yeah.
Put it in your shower.
Yeah.
Shower it down, leaves and all. Just drown it, essentially. Turn off your shower. Let it drain in the shower.
With cold water?
Yeah, but I mean not freezing cold water. Just, tepid water. And then do that maybe once a week in the summer, once every 2 weeks in the winter. Cleans off all the dust off the leaves, any little kind of pests or bugs that you might have on your house plants. It'll get rid of all of those.
I'm really confused. Doesn't that wash out like nutrients in the soil?
No, I mean it's the equivalent of it being outside and getting rained on.
Oh, right. Okay, I see. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you're not kind of showering it for 25 minutes. You're just briefly, and then put it back in. But you want to, much better to soak your plants through less frequently than to water them a little bit more frequently. In most cases for plants.
Oh, yeah.
You're listening to The Bridge.
You have a cat?
2 now.
2 cats.
Yeah.
And you are involved in helping save animals that need rescuing. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not me personally involved with the actual rescuing, but Nigel and I, my husband and I, we do donate regularly to Furry Tales, which is a...
Furry Tales.
Furry Tales, yeah. And it's actually run by 2 expat women.
So if we have WeChat and we want to find it, we just look...
Furry Tales. Yeah, Furry Tales. and they do just the most spectacular job.
Well, what do they do?
They rescue animals from the streets if there are strays around, and then they also help out with a shelter, at a big animal shelter.
So that's what they need money for.
Yeah,
keeping the animals
in the shelter
while they're looking for
foster care or adoptions. And so they do. But these two girls, they just do the most fantastic job helping in the community, and I think that's kind of key to living in a new place, that you want to be involved in the community.
Yeah.
Right? And they do that so wonderfully.
Is that where you got your second cat?
Yeah, Brenda.
That's my mom's name.
Oh, really?
So when you adopted my mom, like she was saved from the streets?
She was saved from Xinjiang, actually.
Wow.
So she was she's one of those kind of flat-faced exotic short hairs. And so when she was born, she was riddled with health problems. And so rather than the breeder putting the money in to save her, they just out on the street. And so she was found by a lady in Xinjiang, a couple of weeks old, lice and runny eyes, and like in a really, really bad way. And so the lady in Xinjiang nursed her back to health, and then she was shipped to Beijing, where Fairy Tales got her, and then another lady fostered her until she was, I think we got her when she was about 9 or 10 months old. And when we got her, she was 90% healthy, like she was almost, perfect. And now she's about 18 months old and she's thriving.
Great. That's fantastic. Great story.
Yeah.
Wow. So Fairy Tales exists in just Beijing or other communities as well? This is very local. These two ladies.
Yeah, as far as I know, just Beijing. But the two women, they're very well connected. When we had that exchange when you were moving your cats here and about, and they've got a kind of WeChat group. They're always going to know someone in another city.
Yeah, I needed to move my cat because we were at the line where we needed to move to Beijing. And the previous time we'd moved, we did the long paperwork thing. It took us a month to get all the paperwork and shots to fly her. But we were like, we don't have time this time. We need to get her to Beijing.
Shipping company.
Exactly, and they were able to transport her in a car to Beijing. It took a couple days, but she's with us. She's happy.
You're listening to The Bridge.
And one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on is because a lot of our listeners are parents in China who are trying to raise their children, have many questions. And part of that is to do with learning English, but also just learning in general. So could you tell us a little bit about if a child is struggling to learn something new, let's pretend it's English for now, like what are some of the things that they can do to help their child learn more successfully? I know it's a very general question. We can narrow in later.
Yeah. I think you've got to find what your child enjoys. I think if you're a parent and you're trying to, help your kid with reading, for example, and you're presenting them with book after book after book with topics that the child isn't interested in, they're never going to want to pick up that book every day and read it. And I always give the advice to parents at Muffy's to take your child to a bookstore. Have them pick out books that they really like. And if your child wants 10 books, if they want 10 books on turtles, buy 10 books on turtles. If they love dinosaurs, buy them just dinosaur books. And get them to fall in love with reading first. And then you can kind of introduce different genres and different books, and you can kind of focus in on teaching the skills of reading when they're enjoying it. I think that's the key that we want. We want kids to love education. We don't want them to see it as a kind of chore.
One of the questions that educators get is they want their children to self-direct a little bit, to have a little more autonomy. How can parents, while still wanting to be a helicopter parent with their child doing their homework and things, how can they also encourage their child to study a little more independently?
I think you've got to find a balance with your children, right? Like I think if you're, like we talked about earlier with hobbies and working really hard but having an outlet, I think your children have got to have the same kind of balance. That having a schedule for your children is really important. But I think you've got to make sure that there's a balance, right? That you've got to make sure that there is time for studying and then also time for recreation and time for play. And I think it's important that your children know that. That if you're asking them, hey, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, those are studying days. Tuesday, Thursday, those are your own free time. Saturdays, you take class. Sundays is your time. And as your child gets older, you might adjust that balance of study days versus play days. But I think you need to let the child know that they have time to study and time to play, so that when it is that studying day, they might feel a little bit more committed to that studying day because they can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
I have another question. I've heard different answers about about this, so I'd be curious to hear your perspective because you are a long-term educator with who is highly qualified. A lot of parents have the idea that there's a specific age that is suitable for learning a foreign language, specifically English here in China. So is that true? What would you say is a good time to get your child into learning a foreign language?
I mean, as early as possible. You know, I think being bilingual, you know, happens very often when you've got two parents that speak different languages, because you're hearing it right from birth.
Yeah.
And I think any time that if you would like your child to be bilingual, as early as possible, you know, early and often. There's a lot of research that talks about the first 5 years of a child's life is the kind of most important time. And you know you're never going to get that 5 years back. So that if you can find a place that's really going to support a wide range of needs, you know, not just language acquisition, but also being independent and fostering a love of nature and books and physical education. You know, those first 5 are the most important. So putting your child into a system where if you want bilingual education, great, as early as possible, but not forgetting about the wider range of skills is also important.
I want to ask you about a story, because you have a lot of academic background, but you also have a lot of experience, and I think both can be helpful in this sort of field or any field. Is there a particular moment or a particular student or even a whole class that stands out to you where you really clicked about something regarding how children learn?
I remember one of my very favorite teaching moments. I had a student called Joyce. This was years ago, so maybe in my first or second year of China, so she'd be a teenager now. And so I remember she was really, really interested in space. Anything, planets, moons, rockets, astronauts, anything space related. And we were a couple of months away from graduating, and so she was reading pretty well. You know, she was able to pick up books and read that well. And there was a news article that I'd read that morning before coming to school about, you know, one of those kind of scientists discover new planet, scientists discover new moon, or I forget what it was. And so I just screenshotted the headline, and then that morning when I went into school I just gave her my phone. And that moment where she was reading it and then looked at me and then read it and then looked at me really? And that was magical for me, that, you know, she was a child that came in not knowing how to read, found something that she really found enthusiastic, and then I transferred the gift of actually being able to read and understand and process what she was reading, and then to give her the enjoyment of discovering something. That's magical for me.
Is that going back to the same kind of story about bringing them to the bookstore? So what the things that they find interesting are going to be the things that are best utilized to teach them how to read, how to learn, to listen.
And parents can definitely utilize that. We talk a lot in education about the kind of method of when and then. You know, when you finish this page of homework, then I'll read you a dinosaur book. Or when you've done your homework, then you can get your favorite toy.
Reward-oriented.
Yeah, reward-orientated, but they know that the positive thing is coming after. You know, the when and then, when you've done this, then this can happen.
We can watch that show, Hulu,
or whatever, or, you know, or whatever it might be.
I have a friend of the show. I don't want to embarrass her, but one of her sons, her son is a bit distracted oftentimes, and she's wondering how to approach helping him focus. Could you give us some tips?
I think timing is a big thing. I think, and I hear this a lot from parents that, you know, my child won't sit down and finish the task, or they won't do their homework task. And the first question we always kind of talk about is, well, how long are they expected to do that activity for? You know, and I get it sometimes with parents that ask me about classes, like piano class. And my child doesn't want to play the piano. And I'm like, well, how long are you having the classes for? Well, it's 5 days a week for an hour.
And they're like 4.
And that's a lot of time, right? That's something, you know, even for adults, sitting for an hour and doing any one task is going to be a lot. And so I think for children, small chunks is often more manageable. And again, just like with the schedule, giving your child the schedule, letting them know that this is what's happening on these days. And the same when you sit them down to do homework, an egg timer, the phone, letting them know that you've got 10 minutes. 10 minutes of studying. When the 10 minutes is up, you can go do something else. When the timer goes off, then you can do something else. But I'm also going to set a timer for the playtime. And when you finish playing, then you're going to come back and do 10 minutes more. And so you can kind of structure it in a way that kind of suits their attention.
Would you be able to adjust that after 6 months? So that there's like a few more minutes.
Yeah, maybe 13 minutes, 14 minutes, 15. Yeah, of course.
Concentration maybe.
Maybe increases, but I think you don't want to set children up for failure. You want to set them up for success. And so if we're expecting a child to sit for an hour, we set them up for failure because that's not realistic.
And then they're like feeling bad because they didn't meet mom or dad's expectations.
We want to, if we expect a 6-year-old to sit for 5 minutes, that's more than doable, right?
You're listening to The Bridge.
So could you tell us a little bit about how is education evolving here? I mean, what was it called? The double reduction that came into play last year or the year before?
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
And so how has teaching, especially as it relates to foreigners, evolving now?
Anytime you have a very oversaturated market, and that's definitely what education was in Beijing. You couldn't really walk into any mall.
There's English
everywhere,
ESL,
right?
Apple,
everywhere. Coffee shop, training school, training school, right?
Yeah.
And I think any time with a very oversaturated market, the quality is going to vary drastically.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people kind of opened schools or opened training centers, hired a expat, gave them a textbook. And
you have a degree in photography? You're going to make a great English teacher.
No training, no professional development along the way, and they put this, expat in the classroom that might have done a 3-hour course on and hope it works.
Yeah.
And that's, we talked about the first 5, right? Like the first 5 years of education, you don't have any room to make mistakes with a child's education. And so I agree with the big shake-up. I think there definitely needed to be some reform. There needed to be more regulations on the types of people that were teaching, on the types of schools that were allowed to teach and the materials that they were teaching. I think it's got a lot of people worried because for a lot of parents, those training centres, the public education system maybe doesn't have as much English as they want to have. They wanted the English in the evenings and the English at the weekends. And so I think for some parents, they're kind of feeling, from my experience of talking to the parents at Moffies, some of them are a little bit anxious about what they will do when they leave kindergarten. Where can they get that extra English from? Where are they going to get that kind of environment from? But I like the fact that they are pivoting more towards, dance and arts and music and those kind of things. And I hope that in the next sort of few years, maybe they will reintroduce more of the training centre style back, but maybe in a more controlled fashion, and then we'll have a little bit more regulation to it. The types of people that are teaching, the types of people that are, opening schools that have academic backgrounds or education backgrounds. And I see that now with interviewing people, that there are teachers out here that don't have experience or even passion or drive to teach. They are just...
Oh, I want to spend time in China.
Yeah.
I found that was a teaching job. I'll come over for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's disheartening for me. We could do an entire another podcast on terrible interviews in China.
Could you tell us? Please don't use anyone's name.
Yep.
You could not even where they're from.
Of course.
So no one will have any idea. Could you tell us one or two very peculiar interview stories?
Sure. So I'll tell you one kind of general one that comes up a lot.
Okay. That's
one of my favorite questions to ask, and it's a question I always ask in the interview. We talk about story time. We talk about reading and having kids really love books and be passionate. And story time is a kindergarten tradition. Kids on the floor, picture books, reading aloud. And so anyone that interviews for a kindergarten, I always ask them, what's your favourite children's book? Because there is an alarming amount of kindergarten educators or that are interviewing to be kindergarten educators that can't name a single children's book.
Wow.
Terrifying.
That is actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
We couldn't even say the name Dr. Seuss.
No, caterpillar, like nothing.
Wow.
And that's terrifying.
They don't remember their own education.
No.
I'm surprised because I could probably, in addition to the books that I love, I could just name random stories. Wow, this is bizarre.
And then the other kind of thing that happens from time to time, which is heartbreaking to me, is people that are teaching currently, that are looking for a new job. Again, they might be people that aren't really invested in teaching. And a story that happened a few weeks ago, and it made me quite angry, we very often liaise with agencies. So teachers will find an agency, the agency will communicate with us. And
because I worked with you, and I came through an agent, and he was very kind, respectful.
I adore your agent, actually.
Yeah.
He is one of the nicest guys. Yeah, he's wonderful. So we were trying to set up an interview with, the said individual, and the agent was kind of liaising back and forth. So I never spoke to the candidate individually, but basically he was asking the agent, what will the salary be? Before anything else, before about the environment, the school, the curriculum, the people, nothing. So the agent was trying to be, it's a range, it depends on your experience and your interview and your qualifications, if they're satisfied with you, they'll make you an offer. And his reply back, and the agent screenshotted it and sent it to us, was, I'm white and native, why wouldn't they be satisfied? I was livid.
Higher, automatic.
Automatic, absolutely. I can introduce a teacher to children's books. If they answer all the other questions correctly, I might forgive can't name a children's book. But that level of entitlement, you're going to be someone's teacher.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be teaching anybody. And it happens more than you think.
Could you tell us a little bit about people coming to China now? How can they get a job here in China? So they're like, okay, I'm in the UK, I'm in the United States, I'm in Australia, wherever. I want to come to China and do what Chrissy does, or at least be a teacher. What is the process like, and how do they do that?
Actually, I think now more than ever, I think people have got to be very, very cautious when finding a job. There is obviously a huge lack of teachers right now. The expat population is on the decline in China, and I do think it'll swing back round again. I do think as restrictions ease in China, it'll be easy for people to come. Maybe expats that left will come back. But now, especially for me, and I hear this a lot, I do all of the interviews for Muffy's, so I interview all our potential candidates. And whether it's people that are in Beijing or in different parts of China that have found themselves in very risky and very dangerous situations where they've expected to find one kind of job and then it's really not gone that way for them. And I think whenever you're overseas, make sure that you are applying direct with a school and try and avoid the kind of agent middleman if you can.
We have jobs in these 20 cities.
Exactly,
maybe not have your best interest in heart.
Yeah, and there's obviously there's a lot of schools recruiting, and there's a smaller number of people that need those jobs. And so I think for a lot of employers, they are kind of throwing around huge salaries and great packages, but maybe when you get into that position, it isn't exactly what you anticipated it being. I'm hoping that it'll kind of swing back round again and things will kind of even out with more expats coming in and the kind of job market will kind of settle itself down. But as someone who's recruiting at the minute, it's tough with lots of competition and not so many people coming in, but I would just advise anybody just to do your research. Make sure that your new employer allows you to speak directly with current employees, that you've seen videos from the actual school with actual employees. Ask for a video tour. See the facilities. Make sure that you've spoken to somebody that works, not just one person, but multiple people.
You're listening to The Bridge.
So could you tell me some of the things or some of the cities, experiences that you enjoyed about living in China?
I mean, the big kind of life-changing thing that happened to me in China is I got married last year in China.
Did you have your wedding here?
I did.
And family from both of you?
No. So
how did that work?
We wanted a big wedding. My partner Nigel, he's from the States. I'm obviously from England, so we were planning pre-pandemic, so pre-2020. We were planning on having a big wedding, maybe in China or maybe overseas somewhere. Or maybe both, bring everybody over. And obviously when the pandemic happened, we couldn't do that. And we were kind of getting anxious during the pandemic that if it was to get worse and we would have to go back to our, different countries. I mean, if it was to get worse.
You can go to the United States without a visa. You just show up, right?
Yeah, but you can't stay there and live and work, right?
Maybe you could get there and then
if you wanted to. Back then in 2020, the British Embassy and the American Embassy weren't marrying two expats. So if you were a foreign passport holder or a Chinese passport holder, you could get married. But two foreign passport holders couldn't get married.
I'm confused.
So then in 2021, so last year, the British Embassy, they announced, okay, two foreigners can get married. And so we immediately put our names down on the waiting list, and we were told it would be March of this year. And then we put our names on the waiting list in October, and then we got a phone call and they were like, December 7th. And so
they decided your date.
You get no choice in it. They were like, December 7th. December Pearl Harbor Day. So it's not, it's a bit of a...
Maybe you're making it better now. Something better. There was ceremony.
So it's
white dress, red dress.
a kind of creamy ivory kind of colour. You know what though? It was the first time in 11 years I'd ever dealt with the British embassy, with the consulate, and it was the easiest thing I've ever done in China.
Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, I expected it to be this huge kind of paperwork monstrosity to get married, and it really wasn't. It was just essentially, it was a phone call to the consulate, put the name on the waiting list, fill in a form. My husband, he got his affidavit from the
I remember doing
embassy. We had 3 witnesses. We went to the consulate, and basically it's a room not dissimilar to this. There's a big picture of God rest her soul, the Queen in the background. One table, a few chairs. And basically, she wasn't the ambassador. I forget who married us, but a person from the British Embassy married us, signed the paperwork. But it was so easy. Just a few forms online, pay the money, wasn't even expensive, and then wedding certificate.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we might do a big wedding later, but definitely
I'd love
soon.
to come.
Yeah. So right now, I think
if you do a big ceremony, would you do like a British style, or would you incorporate Chinese elements?
Yeah. I want to do the fusion. I want to change the dress like 5 times.
Yeah. That's what I was curious about. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. It was lovely to see you again.
All right, bye.